Hi, this is Marsha.
And this is Kelly.
We are the 2U's of 2U's Fiber Adventures. Thanks for stopping by.
You'll hear about knitting, spinning, dyeing, crocheting, and just about anything else we can think of as a way to play with string.
We blog and post show notes at 2usfiberadventures.com.
And we invite you to join our 2U's Fiber Adventures group on Ravelry. I'm 100 Projects.
And I am Better in Motion.
We're both on Instagram and Ravelry, and we look forward to meeting you there.
Enjoy the episode. Hi, Kelly.
Hi, Marsha.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yes, happy Thanksgiving to you, too.
We are recording on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
And
I'm totally relaxed.
well, I'm very relaxed, and we're having two very different Thanksgivings. And because I purchased my Thanksgiving dinner from Whole Foods, and I picked it up today. The only thing I'm going to make is a salad and a pumpkin pie.
Nice.
But you're going to be cooking all day tomorrow. You're making 2 turkeys, right?
Mm-hmm. 2 turkeys, stuffing, Brussels sprouts, mashed potatoes. Oh, I hope Robert bought potatoes. I don't remember putting those on the list. Gravy. My mom's bringing pies. I'm sure my sister will bring something interesting.
I know what I wanted to ask. Relish. You often make the Susan. Are you going to make her relish?
I am. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I'm making the cranberry, sour cream, and horseradish relish. And then I'll probably I usually make another couple of cranberry sauces just because I love cranberry sauce and I like making cranberry sauce. So I usually make another couple of them. And then I have a can of cranberry sauce too because I like the kind that comes out of the can in the shape of the can. And you cut it in slices. I actually like that cranberry sauce a lot, so...
Yeah, I don't think it, well, honestly, I don't think it tastes any different than the stuff that my mother used to make, which sounds terrible. I'm sorry, Mother, that I said that, but... The
ones I make are very good. Mm-hmm. The horseradish one is very different from the one in a can.
Yeah.
And then there's one that my niece made one year, and I thought it was really good. And it's like bourbon vanilla cranberry sauce. And it's good, but it's really sweet. But it has the vanilla with it is an interesting combination. And then I have figs, so I'll probably make a cranberry fig, which I also like. So the ones I make are all very different from the normal cranberry sauce. And then we have the normal cranberry sauce for people who prefer that. I like them all. I just have a large plate of cranberry sauce for Thanksgiving. Not true, but I do have a lot of cranberry sauce on my plate on Thanksgiving.
Well, I always think that, and everybody says this, but the turkey really is just an excuse to have all this other stuff. The potatoes and the gravy and the dressing and the cranberries and whatnot. So.
Right. And I like having cranberry sauce to put on my sandwich for the next however many days.
Yeah.
Thinking, though, about having a plate full of cranberry sauce, I do have to tell one funny story before we start talking about yarn. The Susan Stamberg, the Mama Stamberg cranberry sauce that I make with the horseradish and sour cream and onion and cranberries. It's really easy to make, and I know I've shared the recipe before in show notes, and if I remember, I'll put it in the show notes for this episode. But if you just Google it, Susan Stamberg does this every year on NPR. She gets her recipe in there. But anyway, one year there was a Thanksgiving feast at school. Our department, the math and science department, had this Thanksgiving thing, and the dean, had got a turkey, and she brought that in, and we all brought in sides and stuff. And so one of the things that I brought was that cranberry sauce. And of course, when you go to a potluck, there's nobody to explain what you brought.
Yes.
So... the division secretary Karen, she looks at it and it looks like Jell-O salad to her. So she takes a big spoonful, like you would, of a size of spoon that you would put Jell-O salad on your plate, and then she takes a bite, expecting it to be like raspberry Jell-O salad with whipped cream and raspberry Jell-O. And it's horseradish and onion and cranberry. And then afterwards, she did come to Thanksgiving dinner at our house a couple of different years. And she asked me about it, and I told after that event, and I told her what was in it, and we laughed about it. And she said, it really does taste a lot different when you're expecting it to be horseradish and sour cream and onion and cranberries. It tasted horrible when she was expecting it to be raspberry Jell-O salad. So that was just fun. I always think Karen's gone now, but I always think of her when I make that cranberry sauce. So yeah. So lots of cooking, and I'll have a pretty big crowd tomorrow. I think we'll have about 12 people.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it'll be good. It'll be good.
Okay. Should we start with projects?
Yeah.
I'm going to go first because I have a big accomplishment.
You have a lot to say.
I texted Kelly, I don't know, a couple days ago. I have a lot to say about these afterthought heel socks. And then I was thinking as I was making my notes, I thought, now what exactly do I want to say about them? Okay, I'm going to put my knitting down. I'm actually working on my second pair of socks, another pair of socks. But I am going to set that down to talk about these afterthought heel socks.
Because your gauge might get all wonky as you get so tense as you talk about your experience.
As I start yelling. No. So I talked about this before, the way I did these afterthought heel socks. And the more research I did, I think it's a kind of a crazy way I was doing them. I think most of the afterthought heel socks, you put in waste yarn to hold that area, where the heels, you just knit down, like one sock at a time. So you knit down, either toe up or toe down, I don't know if it matters, but then you put that, where the heel's going to go, you put that on waste yarn, finish the sock, and then come back to it. And I think the real sort of purpose of the afterthought heel is if you have self-striping yarn that it doesn't disrupt the pattern by doing the heel flap and the gusset. Well, my yarn didn't really have it. It wasn't forming stripes. It did sort of end up forming sort of a barber pole,
like a spiral. Kind of spiraled around.
Yeah, but it didn't really. It was not self-striping. So, but I wanted to try this technique. So, as I've talked about before, I knit a long tube, 34 inches long, which I then followed the YouTube tutorial where I then cut that in half. And so what you do is you put in waste yarn at that point where you want it, at the row that you want to cut, you put the waste yarn on either side of that row. And then cut that yarn and remove it. So now your live stitches are on the waste yarn. And you have to keep track of up and down. So which end is going to be your cuff. And so I just put a marker in there to mark that that's going to be my cuff edge. Then I had to figure out how to measure to figure out where the heel is. And remember I said in the last episode, if you imagine your footprint in the sand, you want to make the cut where your heel joins that narrow part on the side of your foot.
Right.
That's really difficult to measure. I realize it's very difficult to measure. So the tutorial said is you take the length of your foot and you subtract 2 inches for the toe and 2 inches for the heel. And that's where you make your cut for the heel. So if my brother's foot is 11 inches, I subtracted 4 inches. So that means at 7 inches from the end where the toe is going to be, that's where I made the cut for the heel, which is what I did. And you do the same technique as the row that you want to cut. You put in waste yarn on either side of that row, above it and below it. And you also this tutorial said you do 2 stitches beyond the stitches that you're going to cut. And the reason is that then when you pick up those stitches and start knitting the heel, you don't have a hole. Because sometimes when you pick up, Kelly, stitches for the gusset do you sometimes have a hole?
Yeah, and I usually grab one of the stitches below and twist it and put it on and knit it together.
That's what I do too. Yeah. So this all sounds really easy. Okay, and let me say, as I'm describing this now, it sounds really easy. It was so hard to do. I had to be home all day because they were working on the fireplace, rebuilding the fireplace. So I thought this is going to be a good day. I didn't have to be anywhere. I thought I can just lay this out, have good light, and so it took me all day.
Oh my God.
And partly because I was doing because it's you know what my father always taught me about cutting with a saw is, where is it, measure twice, cut once?
Yes.
And I remembered that, so I wanted to make sure I'm putting this, I'm cutting it in the right place. And cutting in half was not so bad, but cutting where that heel's going to go was really stressful. But it took me all day, and then I'm hunched over, the breakfast table with the light, and my neck, by the end of the day, my neck was just killing me. And I'm so tense because having to make that first cut.
The pattern needs to be reported to OSHA.
So I have to say, too, when I first cut the 2 socks in half, even though I measured, one of them ended up being about a half inch longer than the other one.
Oh, no.
I have no idea how I did that. But anyway, I did. So then I picked up and I did the heels first. So I picked up the stitches, off that waist yarn, and I did, somebody had said to do 10 rows of stockinette before you start the decreases, to make room for the arch.
And that sounded like a lot to me.
That sounded like a lot, and it sounded like a lot to our listeners because one of our listeners said, oh no, that's way too much, don't do 10. Mm-hmm. So back to doing research, and I did 5 rows of just stockinette, and then I started doing the decreases every other row until I had 14 stitches left, and that's when I did a Kitchener stitch to join the heel. And so they seemed fine, but then I just and then I did the toes, but the 2 inches was not enough. Remember, I said that to find where to put the heel in, you subtract 2 inches for the toe and 2 inches for the heel. Well, 2 inches wasn't quite enough because when my brother tried the sock on, and let me back up. When I do a top-down sock, when I knit the sock till I get to the end of my little toe. As I keep trying it on, when I get to the end, doing stockinette to the end of my little toe, and then that's when I start doing the shaping for the toe. Well, this went much longer than that. So it was almost like an inch too long.
Okay.
So I couldn't bring myself to rip it out, so I just knit the toe. And I just did decreases faster. And he hasn't tried them on yet, so I'm hoping it'll work.
He won't notice.
Yeah, he could just roll it up, maybe. I mean, if it really is horrible, I'll rip it out and reknit it. But I thought maybe it'll be okay. And then I went back and I put in about an inch of ribbing around the top in the contrasting color.
Well, they look awfully pretty. I saw the picture. They look really nice.
I'm never, ever, ever going to do this again. I think that the idea of the afterthought heel makes sense if you have the self-striping yarn. It doesn't make any sense. To me, it doesn't make sense to go through all this rigmarole when it took me longer to knit these socks than if I had just knit them the regular way.
Yeah. Now, I have a question for you, because when you were talking about the heels, you were saying you put in waste yarn to tell you where to snip. So you cut and you put waste yarn, or you just put waste yarn and then that gave you the gap when you took the waste yarn out?
No. So what I did is, so you have the stockinette tube and you put the waste yarn in. If you're looking at it, you're holding up your stockinette on, so you know where the line is where you want to cut. You put the waste yarn in the row above that line you want to cut.
Oh, so you don't do that when you're knitting.
No.
Oh, okay.
No, so you just knit the entire tube without any waste yarn and then go back and do all of this. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm convinced that I'm not going to do them.
No, I don't. I would not do them.
We've talked about this. I like how socks are broken up. They have a little bit of something and then something else, and then a little bit of something and then something else.
Yeah. Now, I mean, I will say the cool thing is once you do knit that long tube and you cut it, you're almost done. I mean, the heels go really quickly because it's just it's mostly decreasing, and the same thing with the toes.
Right.
So but I will not be doing this again. I'm not saying this is anything against the video tutorial. But I'm not doing this again. This is not how I like to make socks.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make any sense this is my opinion, and if listeners have a different opinion, I'm more than willing to be convinced of something else, but I don't think it makes any sense to do an afterthought heel if you have a solid or a semi-solid yarn. Because there's nothing to break up.
Right.
So,
right. I mean, your spiraling would have changed a little bit because I have socks that do that. They spiral around the leg, and then they have these like big sort of flashes or big giant pools of color around the gusset. But I don't. Yeah. That doesn't bother me. But I think it's a good thing for self-striping. I just don't make. I just don't. It's rare for me to do a stockinette sock.
Well, and I have to say, I went back and I looked at all my self-striping socks, and now maybe I'm not too super particular but they don't seem to really. They go back to the patterning eventually.
Yeah, they do.
You know what I'm saying?
They do.
I don't. And if it's different, it's not different enough that I can tell the difference. So,
but some of those self-striping yarns are a 3/4 inch stripe of this color, and then a 1 inch stripe of this color, and then a 1/2 inch stripe of that. I mean, they're very precise, and so for those, I think it makes sense if you use those kinds of yarns.
Along those lines, too, I just have to say we went. We'll get back to projects, but about self-striping sock yarn and making them match. When we went down again to Seabrook this past weekend because we got a 2-for-1, 3 nights for the price of 2 deal, so we took advantage of it. And at the yarn shop down there, String Theory, I bought 2 skeins of yarn, even though I swore I was not going to buy anything. And one is this that Schoppel, and it's called Das Paar. Anyway, it's 1 skein of yarn, but when you take it apart, there's apparently there's a clear delineation about where you start.
Oh yeah.
So both socks will match.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try that, and then but
you're not going to do them as afterthought heels.
No, I don't think I'll be doing afterthought heels again. Actually, before I completely diss afterthought heels, I think afterthought heels where you put the waist yarn in while you're knitting it, I think, would be. I might consider that. I could be maybe. Listeners could probably convince me to do that if they try really hard.
Marsha's arm could be twisted.
It might be twisted, yeah. Anyway, and then the other thing I just a shout out to an indie dyer in Aberdeen, Washington, called Little Fish Stitches. String Theory had brought in a bunch of her yarn, and it's really pretty, and I'm dying to start knitting with this because it's hot pink and hot turquoise and a hot goldy yellow, and as I say, it's called Happy Go Lucky, and it really makes you happy looking at this yarn. And I've been doing so much blue, and I want to do something in hot pink, something different. So I'm hoping to cast on with that soon. So a little shout out to her. And she does, she's selling the yarn in the yarn shop in Seabrook, but she also has an Etsy shop called Little Fish Stitches. Okay. And she also has a video blog too, which I was watching that. So it's kind of fun.
Okay, cool. So, I'll put a link to that.
Yeah. And then the other thing I just want to say about my afterthought heel socks is this is part of our learn along, which Kelly, we should probably just mention that this ends November 30th. I did cast on another sock just because I needed to do a sock that was not an afterthought heel. So I am using destash yarn, and I'm just going to do some, just as you call them, vanilla socks, and it's a ball of destash yarn called Austermann, and it's called Step. And this is destash yarn that I got at the NoCKRs retreat, and it's from Julie J. Chant.
Oh, what a coincidence! So. My project that I'll talk about is destash yarn from Julie too.
So I've had this now a couple of years, so I'm trying to. Make things for other people. So these socks will be given away. And then the last thing I cast on, I think I talked about wanting to cast this on, but I finally cast on Cloud Cover. It's a cardigan by Heidi Kermeyer, and I'm using Jupiter Moon Farm Findlay Dappled DK. in 50/50 merino silk.
Oh, nice.
And so I'm almost done with the yoke. And it's an interesting construction because if I'm reading the pattern correctly, you do the yoke, and then when you get down to the arms where you normally, you would put the sleeves on waste yarn and join the body, you knit the sleeves. You knit one sleeve first and then knit flat, knit the other sleeve, and then go back and do the body.
Oh.
Is that different, huh?
Yeah.
So, and you have the option of knitting them in the round if you want, but it says in the pattern that if the body you're knitting back and forth, you're knitting and purling for your stockinette, and then you switch to the sleeves and you're doing all stockinette, that the gauge can change.
Right.
So that's to avoid that.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I've heard that people have that problem with gauge, and I think my gauge is different in flat knitting and circular knitting too. I've had a couple of patterns where I actually added to the sleeves so that they would be, big enough. And when I started them, they seemed like, okay, they're still not big enough, and I had to add more. So I think I might knit tighter in the round. And that's a good idea.
I was at a yarn shop this past week because I had to pick up more of the colorway for the afterthought heel socks for the heels, and because I had run out, and talking to one of the women working in the store, and she uses the needles, circular needles that you can attach the different tips to them, and she'll put one size on one end and another size on the other end, because she knits different to keep the tension the same. So, for example, if she knits tighter on the knit side and looser on the purl side, then she uses that needle. So it ends up like having. If you're tighter on the knit, then she would use the larger size needle on the knit side and the smaller size on the purl side.
Wow,
that's interesting. But Kelly, how about you? Your projects?
Well, I'm sitting here right now, madly knitting on the sleeves of my running water cardigan. And that's all I have left, is to finish the sleeves, because you do the collar band, right? The collar band is already done. Well, the pattern calls for you to do the sleeves first, but I was uncertain how much yarn I was going to have. So I ended up ordering, I think I talked about this, that I ended up needing to order more of the chickadee. So I did order more of the chickadee so I could finish the collar band. And then I wasn't sure I was going to have enough of the cashmere even to finish the sleeves. So I divided the cashmere in half, and I decided to do the Fibonacci stripes, not the full sequence, but a portion of the Fibonacci sequence on the sleeve. So I did the first sleeve like that, and did the cuff and everything. I'll get back to that in a minute. And I had yarn left over. So I thought, okay, well, that means the next sleeve I can do without the stripes. And I should have enough yarn because, whatever I had left over from the first sleeve, I could use to help me have enough in the second sleeve, even though I wasn't using the teal chickadee, to fill in some space. So that's what I'm doing. And I made it all the way down. The one sleeve is done all the way. The cuff is done. The other sleeve, I'm at the point right now. In fact, while you were talking earlier, I got up and got my smaller size needle so I can do the ribbing on the cuff. So yeah, it's exciting. The first cuff, though, I don't really like how I was raving about the tubular bind off? It looks great in the chickadee. The gauge of the chickadee is nice and tight because it's a sport weight yarn. I have a sport weight and a fingering weight, and when I did my gauge swatch, I was mostly concerned about the fingering weight cashmere, and so that's the one I was focused on. So the chickadee is kind of dense. That part of the sweater, the stripes are kind of dense, and I love the way the bind off looks. But the cashmere is not dense. And the bind off is really sloppy. And then the other thing is, I think I made a mistake, is one thing, but it doesn't look right. And then also because it's in the round, you know how when you go in the round, at the very end, one side's higher than the other?
Right.
So I do have that part, but I think that part won't be a big deal. So I'm going to rip out the first cuff, and I think maybe right before I do the bind off, I'm not going to rip out the whole cuff, but right before I do the bind off, maybe like the last few rows before I do, you do these 2 setup rows that are kind of like double knitting. You take the set of stitches and you split it into 2 layers, and you knit the 2 layers. You make those 2 layers kind of spread out from each other, and then you Kitchener together for the tubular bind off. And I think maybe a couple of rows before I do those setup rows, I'm going to go down a needle size. Because it's plenty stretchy. It's not like I'm going to not be able to put my arm through it. So going down a needle size is not going to make it so my sweater... suddenly I can't get my arm through my sweater.
Right, and this is with the cashmere, right?
And this is with the cashmere.
Okay.
And it's got so much more drape and a lot less. The 2 yarns are very different. One has a lot of body. The chickadee has a lot of body, and the cashmere doesn't. And the cashmere's thinner than the chickadee, and it's at a drapier gauge than the chickadee. It's on size 5 needles, so it's a pretty open gauge. So anyway, I think it just needs snugging up a little bit. So I'm gonna do that. I was hoping I was going to be able to do that this afternoon. I came home from work early, but that didn't happen. I wasn't able to get them done. So I'm working on them right now. But I'm excited because once I get that done, this thing is done.
Yeah.
So I do have one sort of qualm about it. And that is the same thing that you've talked about, and I don't know why I didn't think about it, but the same thing that you've talked about in that sweater that you want to make that has ribbing for the front band.
Oh, the one I make, cloud cover.
Is that cloud cover?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've talked about that several times, that you wanted a yarn that was drapey and not bouncy so that it would block out. Right? So that ribbing will block out nicely and not pull your sweater front band up.
Yes.
So
and I'm hoping with 50-50.
Yeah.
I mean 50 silk, 50 merino, it'll work.
Well, I should have been listening to you a little bit more. Although none of the project pages have this problem, so I may be able to block this. But I put the sweater on to try it on, and although the sweater is really long, the front feels almost like a shrug because it's so.
I'm sorry, Kelly.
No,
I shouldn't laugh.
No, I mean, you know exactly what I'm saying, right? So every time I try it on, I'm like pulling it to make sure, will it stretch that far? And I mean, it's plenty stretchy, so it'll stretch far enough. It's just that.
Will it stay stretched?
Will it stay stretched after I've blocked it? If I wear it in the rain, I'm going to come home wearing a shrug. But, and I should know that. I am smart enough about my knitting to know, and if I wasn't smart enough, I would have known by listening to you talk about cloud cover.
Well, and also, Kelly, I'm smart enough to know alternate your skeins of yarn, and I didn't do it. So on that one sweater, so
Yeah. So I don't know how that's gonna work, and I put in the right number. I picked up the right way, putting in fact, I think I even got the exact right number, which is very rare for me to get the right number of stitches when you pick up around the button band. I do have a slight, very slight change in color from the new skeins in the collar band. When I got the new one, I attached the new one, and then I alternated for a couple of rows, and then with the old one, and then I went back to the new one. And there's a slight difference. I know it's there, and so I can see it. It doesn't bother me. It looks fine. It just looks kind of like a shadow in the. It's a little bit of depth in the yarn, but I am worried about how that collar band is going to block, and if it's going to stay blocked. I may have to spray starch it. It'll be all stiff.
Put some wire in there to make it stay.
But I'm looking forward to having it. It's really warm. sitting on my lap is really warm. The ribbed collar band is really warm. It's not itchy. I'm very pleased with how easy it feels. You know, it is for me to have it against my skin. So I'm excited about almost being done. Yeah.
I know.
It's the only thing I've worked on all week. Yeah, it's the only thing I've worked on actually in 2 weeks. Because our last episode we recorded 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah. I haven't done much knitting.
I'm excited to see it when it's done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, that's the sum total of my knitting. The rest of my fiber things have been watching videos of the online weaving guild. So I've been just having a good time. I watched all of the season 1 videos, but I haven't. It's been kind of frustrating because I want to actually weave something, and I haven't done that. So I watched all the season 1 videos, and then the season 2 videos were this year's videos, and I'm about a third of the way through those. And then the 2019 videos will start coming out, I guess, in January or February. So that's exciting. And, I should mention, I talked on the last episode about how I felt like the price was just a complete steal because it's $75 Canadian, and then with the exchange rate, it ended up being even better. It is going up, I think, December 6th or 7th. Somewhere in the first week of December, she is raising the price, which I think is good because it's well worth a higher price. So it's going up to $99 a year. Okay. So if anyone's interested in that and they want the current price, you want to do that before the beginning of December. Before I think it's like the first week, somewhere in the first week of December, 5th, 6th, something like that.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm really excited about weaving. I just, too many other things going on. School, cooking Thanksgiving dinner. I would have a total 4-day weekend if it wasn't for Thanksgiving.
Damn Thanksgiving.
Well, it'd be nice to see everyone.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and you'll have food for a week.
Yeah. With 2 turkeys, that we do have plenty.
So here's the thing, is you do all the cooking on Thursday, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you can just hang out and do knitting and weaving and all these projects, and you won't have to cook anything because you'll have all those leftovers.
Well, and not only that, I don't even have to come to the table, and because we eat dinner at the dining room table every night. We all sit down and we all eat, and it's nice. I like it, but there are some nights where it's like, I just wish I could get a plate and sit in front of the computer and. Oh,
and now Robert's working swing shift, so you can do that.
Now Robert's working swing shift, so I can do that. And Betty and I have sat down to dinner together a couple of nights since he started swing shift, but she doesn't always. She a lot of times will eat early, so it's just been me. So I shouldn't. It's probably good to sit and eat slowly, but I can be done with dinner in 15 minutes and be back at the loom. Oh, that's terrible. That's terrible. My priorities are strange, but anyway. And not as many dishes to do, so, dish time is going to go faster. Yeah. I'm pleased about what I've finished and excited about what I get to start. So, Oh, I know what I wanted to talk about, though. We don't usually talk about our knits that we're wearing, but I made an amazing discovery. So, do you remember during this summer, when I was making the Sockhead Cowls?
Yes.
I made this one, and I'm going to rave about this yarn, first of all, because I think this yarn is amazing. So Carrie is her name, and her company is Handmade Travels. She's lived in Australia, and she now lives in New York. And she has a yarn dyeing business, and one of the yarns that she has is called Tassie Merino. And I talked about it when I was making the cowl. It is so soft. Oh my gosh. It must be a superfine merino, like a really, really small micron merino. And she sent me information about the farm and their practices, which I thought were really interesting. Tassie fingering is the yarn. And the woman who has the farm has a really nice website as well. Super, super soft. She sources yarn that's 100% traceable. And so this is yarn that comes from a particular farm in Australia. All right, so I raved about the yarn already. I made a Sockhead Cowl, and I made it super big, long, because the yarn skeins come in a big put-up. I think it's almost 500 yards is the put-up.
Okay.
So I've been wearing the cowl. I was sick over Veterans Day, and the Veterans Day weekend I had a bad cold, and we were camping, and it was cold, and I wore the cowl like the entire time. And, you know, sometimes when you want your head warm, you pull the cowl up over your head and your ears. But that's not that attractive of a look. It's fine for camping. It's fine for when you want to be warm. I don't really want to walk to school that way or walk around school that way, right, from building to building. What I discovered, it's an amazing discovery. So I know you're on pins.
I'm sorry, I can hardly contain myself.
So you take the thing and you put the cowl inside out.
Uh-huh.
And then you give it a twist, like a half a twist. You don't even have to give it a full twist. You give it a half a twist. So you have this rectangle laying out on your table, and you take one side of it and you twist it. So it's still a long rectangle, but there's a twist in the middle. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And then
it's like a butterfly, kind of.
Yeah, so it looks like a butterfly. And I think you could probably give it a full twist if you wanted, but a half a twist is enough. And now you fold it back on itself. So you had it laying inside out on the table. You give it a twist, and then you fold it back on itself. And that twist, it makes a hat. Can you picture it?
Yes.
It makes a hat. So,
and how did you discover this?
Well, I saw a hat pattern on Ravelry. I was looking at the project page or the pattern pages, and I saw a hat pattern that had kind of a gathery thing on top. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that's the way that pattern worked or not, but it just got me thinking, I wonder if I could take my cowl and just twist it, and that would make a little gathery thing on the top, but it would be a hat. So, this is cool. Get a big skein of yarn. Make a long Sockhead cowl. The longer, the better, because you don't want your hat to be too short. And do that, and you can wear it. It's got a little bit of a bunchy thing on top that you can kind of pull like a cowl. If you like to wear a bun or a ponytail, and there's a hole in the top of your hat, and your ponytail can poke out. I do not do that. But
you put your wallet up there. And...
in between the two layers, you could hide your money. Anyway,
hide your money.
Anyway, it's the most amazing thing. I love this cowl, and now I could wear it as a hat too. So I wore it as a hat today.
Okay, I'm sure it looks darling. I'm just laughing because the whole thing is so funny. But
it was a big
I want to see pictures of it because I'm sure it's darling.
It's cute. You have to have the other one I made. The other cowl I made is not long enough. It makes too much like a little beanie hat.
Like a little skull cap or like a yarmulke.
Yeah. Well, it's a little bigger than that, but because of the bunchy part at the top, it looks funny. If you have extra length, then that bunchy part is kind of like the slouch. Yeah. And so it looks a little bit better. Yes, I made a discovery that I'm sharing with the world. So that's extent of my my fiber news.
I have one last little update since I've been talking on the phone. Recording is I said I cast on for the second sock, and I usually cast on however many stitches I need and then join it in the round, and I just struggle with it. It's so fiddly, and I always worry that I'm going to get it twisted, and I'm doing it on the double pointed needles and everything. And this time I knit 4 rows of the ribbing and then joined it in the round.
Isn't that a brilliant idea?
And have you heard of that before? Because now I have a little gap, but I have that long tail, which I'll just sew up that gap.
Well, I heard about it when we made the swirl sweaters.
Oh, okay.
I never thought of doing it with a sock, but when we made the swirl sweaters and there was like 5,000 stitches that you cast on. 5,000 stitches. Yes. join in the round and don't twist them. Like, okay, come on. In one of the Ravelry boards about the swirl sweater, someone said, just knit an inch and then join it in the round and then sew up that little inch. And so that's what I did. So that's what I did for that. But no, I never thought of doing it for a sock, but that's a good idea.
It works great because I've sometimes have had to rip it out because I've done it wrong, you know, and it's so fiddly, and then the needles will slide out.
Yeah.
And it joined instantly. It was super easy.
Nice.
So it's just 4 rows. So there's a little. I mean, it's just like a quarter.
Oh yeah, that would be easy to just stitch together.
I thought that was an instant idea I had.
So we're full of tips.
I know we're full of tips. Yeah. So, Kelly, do we have anything else that we want to talk about?
The only thing is we already said that the Learn Along ends on November 30th. I also just want to remind people that the book giveaway ends on December 16th. We're giving away a copy of Raw Material, Working Wool in the West by Stephanie Wilkes. So Stephanie gave us information. She said there's now 2 Seattle events. There's a reading on November 28th at the Seward Park location of Third Place Books. And there's also an event that next evening, so November 29th, at the Eileen Fisher Renew store. We'll have a panel with someone from Renew, the Eileen Fisher program in which lightly worn textiles are resold. And then so also on the panel, besides someone from Renew and Stephanie, is going to be Kathy Hatari of Botanical Colors. And Botanical Colors is a natural dye company. And so she sells dyes, but they're sourced from all over the world, natural dyes. And I listened to her. Kathy Hatari was on an episode of, I think, the Weave podcast. She was interviewed. Very interesting business model. And so her plant dyes are used to renew some of the Eileen Fisher garments. So the 3 of them will be talking at the Eileen Fisher Renew store.
I looked it up after we heard about this. I looked it up, and it sounds very interesting, the store, and this whole concept of how they're reusing lightly, used clothing and over-dyeing it. And so I looked at their website. It looks very interesting. So I'm going to try and go to one of the events.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
it sounds really interesting. And there's been a lot of good discussion on both of the threads that are talking about last week's episode. The one that is just the giveaway thread has had some interesting things raw materials that people use. And then there's been a whole discussion about where is Stephanie going to be and what do people do and the discussion we had. So there's been a whole interesting thread there on the episode 101 thread. So it's been fun to read everybody's reactions. You know, she said with her book, while you're writing the book, you're enjoying what you're writing, but you're never quite sure, how it's going to be received by an audience. And the same thing with the interview. I am fascinated by the whole thing. You are too. I thought people would be interested, and I'm glad to see people were. It sounds like there was a lot of interest in last episode. So,
yeah.
So I think that's the only news. Check out our shop if you're shopping over the Thanksgiving weekend. I've had a couple of requests for people who want to buy fiber. So I can sell washed fiber or unwashed fiber. So if you're interested, you can contact me directly to use at tousefiberadventures.com. And, we can have a conversation about what you want. But if you don't see it in the shop, you can certainly email me and let me know if you're interested in some of the fleeces that we've talked about. Oh, one more thing. We now have 5 patrons for our 2Use Patreon. So we'll be having a quarterly patron drawing on December 1st.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll let you go so you can finish your sleeve and start chopping for tomorrow.
Okay. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone who lives in the U.S.
Happy Thanksgiving. I mean, anybody in the,
If you don't live in the U.S., happy Thursday.
Yeah. Hopefully everyone has a nice time with their families, and hope you have a nice time with your family and your big crowd that's showing up.
Yeah, I will.
Fun. Yeah. Okay, Kelly.
All right.
We'll talk in a while.
Okay.
Alrighty.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening. To subscribe to the podcast, visit 2usfiberadventures.com.
Join us on our adventures on Ravelry and Instagram. I am Better in Motion, and Kelly is 100 Projects.
Until next time, we're the 2 U's
doing our part for World Fleece.